Welcome to the Books and Beer Book Club, coming to you from Cercis Brewing Company in Columbus, Wisconsin. We're a different kind of book club, only reading books by authors who can visit us in person or via Zoom for the discussion. We've been going strong since 2015, meeting nearly every month. We're now making these fun and informative discussions available to you on video. I'm your host, Valerie Beal. I'm an author myself, and I enjoy interviewing our guest authors and facilitating the questions from our readers both in person and on Zoom. We hope you enjoy this replay. To join us live, please check out our schedule on our Facebook page at Books and Beer Columbus.
So welcome. I'm so happy to welcome Sara Alvarado here tonight. So the way I met Sara, Sara was introduced to me by Kristen Mitchell. We talked about Little Creek Press last time. Kristen Mitchell runs Little Creek Press, and I think she gave you my name for potential marketing help, whatever. So eventually what happened is I ended up with the manuscript when it was in this form. So if you have the book in front of you, this is how it looked when I printed it out, because I don't do well reading off of the screen when I'm needing to think. So I wasn't an editor or anything like that. What I was doing is I was reading for marketing ideas and how to position the book in the market and how to go about that. So yeah, I always like to show these. So I'm so if I'm doing a little too much show and tell, I was just teaching middle schoolers like 2 hours ago, but they always are just impressed because they write things that are this big.
I know it's big.
So when you pull it out, this is the norm. This is manuscript style. It's double spaced the way it should be. Yeah. So anyway, but I brought that along tonight because that's how I read the book, and I was looking desperately for the sheets that I had circles to particular passages.
It was edited a lot from there.
Well, I wonder. Well, we'll find out if they're still in there now, because I mean, I guess I should have read the finished book, but I felt like I kind of already read it.
You got it.
So typically, you guys all know my normal first question is how did you decide to write? Tell me about your life. It's the whole book, right? It's a slice. A lot of us want to tell our stories about our lives, but we don't always really, frankly, have the guts to do it. Right. Yeah. And so I'm curious about your process, from the idea of I'm going to write my story to it becoming a reality. I can't remember now how long ago you started to write this. So kind of walk us through the whole inspiration genesis of, the birth of your memoir.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and everyone's read it, which is so cool because when I'm talking to people, some people I haven't read it yet, but then it's hard to talk about it when, so anyway, it took me a couple of years after we moved to Madison for me to actually even kind of all of that happened that quickly, cause it was a lot.
Processing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, it was in 2012 so about 10 years after we arrived in Madison, when I was I wanted to write a book, but I didn't know it was that story at that point. Okay. So it started with me just wanting to write, and I hadn't been writing in years. So,
but I
journaled up until right after. I mean, there's some journal entries from Alex, but it was pretty much when we moved to Madison that I quit journaling. And I think we really got swept up in the speed and intensity of the United States. Mm-hmm. So I didn't journal for 10 years, which is so sad.
Also makes it a lot harder to write a memoir.
Well, I didn't write. Yeah,
I guess you didn't.
I don't have that. Right. It is hard to write a memoir when you don't have journals.
That's true. You wrote up to that point.
Yeah. Right. I had a lot up until that point. So I would say, in 2015, I went to a writing retreat and I was starting to explore. And then it was probably in 2020 where I had started and stopped a couple of different times. And it was in 2020 when I was okay, this is it. This is what needs to be. And so I was in a fire accident in 2019 and had some severe burns. I'm fine, but it was a traumatic experience. And and my mom was going through Alzheimer's. And so it was like these two things of like, well, you don't know if you're going to have time to tell your stories either. And I really wanted to make sure that my kids knew how Carlos and I came to be. Because a lot of times people just see the glossy images and don't see the behind the scenes. And it was really important for me that they would have that just historically.
So did you think when you started to write that it would be a public memoir, like a published memoir, or was it more for family? Did you think at that point?
I didn't think it was, I always wanted to publish it.
Okay.
Yeah. But there were times during the book writing process where I was like, I'm not going to publish this. And then really close to publish date, I was definitely wanting to not publish it.
So yeah, it was.
And my husband was the one that was like, you can do it. I might have not done it if he wasn't so supportive.
So, so your kids are all grown up.
18 and 22.
Have they read it?
The 22-year-old has read it.
Does the 18-year-old want to read it or not want to read it?
No, he doesn't want to read it. And I don't, he doesn't need to read it.
My kids don't read my stuff either, but it's not memoir.
Yeah.
So
I mean, maybe when he's old, he's 18. So
okay.
Someday might.
Okay. I was just curious. So how, so the son who did read it,
Yeah.
how did he react to it?
He
Like
was,
on the initial read?
yeah. He was grateful. He was like,
he?
yeah.
Okay.
He was like, I'm really glad you told the story. Yeah, it was really nice.
That's actually very cool.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'm going to bounce around. I have so many questions and that's the way my brain works. I'll bounce around.
I can bounce.
That's wonderful. And I'm curious though, because memoir is tricky. Did you get any reactions that were unanticipated that were either really, really great that you didn't anticipate, or, reactions to the memoir that weren't as what you wished, like they weren't as nice, maybe? That you're willing to share.
Totally. So at one point, and it was probably a year ago, part of my memoir writing process was Carlos had to read it. And he's super busy. So what I did was I scheduled a time for us every night and I read it to him. Because that's how I knew.
Really sweet.
It was so sweet. I didn't even, for me, it was an efficiency thing. Like, I need to get this done so that I can move on to the next step and know what you're going to want to take out.
Okay, I'm just going to make it sound really romantic and sweet.
So sweet. So I was surprised that he didn't request anything to be removed.
Okay.
He said that there was maybe too many Coke references. But that was it. But he didn't like, I was.
And we're not talking about Coca-Cola.
No.
Yeah.
But I was surprised about that. And then he did have some changes, but they were like literally changes that were factual changes, right?
Like that didn't happen on that date.
Yeah. Or no, I wasn't a busboy. I was a waiter,
Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, this is what I like. It was helpful.
That's wonderful though.
Yeah. So that was really fun. And just the fact that he's been incredibly supportive has been a surprise, because it's fairly revealing in a lot of ways. And
Yes.
we're in the business world.
I call it boldly honest.
Yeah. Yeah. People have been, so that's the two, bold and brave.
See, like I wrote that right here. Boldly honest.
Yeah. So, what other surprises? I mean, it's only been out a month.
Yeah.
I'm still getting different reactions.
Well, and I think that when you write, okay, so this is a revealing memoir. You don't gloss over things.
Right.
That was part of your point,
right?
That you were not going to, Instagram it.
Right.
Just like make it all glossy and pretty. But that's hard to do, especially when, like you say, you're in the business community, you're in Madison, you're fairly well known.
In Madison.
Yeah. And that that people are going to read a lot about your life, traumatic events,
right,
and struggles.
Right.
And maybe we don't have enough honesty like that in the world.
I don't think we do.
Yeah.
I think people suffer on a regular basis and nobody knows.
Right. Right.
And I think when we don't share it, we can't heal it and normalize it. So that's kind of one of the things that I feel really strongly about.
Yeah. And I think you've done a great job with that.
And it shouldn't define us. Our trauma shouldn't define us.
No, it shouldn't define us. But that's actually what you learned in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, right? I mean, that you were looking for a drastic change. And I make like the joke that Puerto Vallarta maybe would not have been the best place to go to, not party.
Right.
I don't know.
No, you're right.
I mean, I can tease you about that because I know it's a joke. It's a joke that I know you made yourself.
Yeah.
But so I I'm curious, I mean, you do such a good job of bringing us into your 24-year-old self.
Yeah.
You know, that point where you're like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I need a drastic change. And that's pretty drastic. But I can't remember now what your reason was for Puerto Rico. I mean, you were a Spanish major in school, so you spoke Spanish.
Okay.
But like, why Puerto Rico? What?
Yeah.
Were you just throwing darts at a Mexican map or?
No, kind of, but like, I didn't know anything about Puerto Vallarta, but I wanted to be in the same time zone as Madison.
Okay, that's actually really smart. Yep.
Because I wanted to be able to communicate easily with my mom.
Okay.
And I wanted the sun to go down into the ocean.
Okay, well, that means you can't be
I couldn't be on there, right? I was on that side, so.
That's very specific.
And it might have been flights, who knows?
I don't know. Well, and then you love the beach too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
But it could have been anywhere on that beach, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah,
so
it was Puerto Vallarta.
there you have it. And then that's it. Then the rest of your life. No, sorry.
I mean, I wanted to go all throughout Mexico, but I landed there and.
Right.
Yeah.
So your Spanish skills were very good already,
Yes.
but there's always that tricky thing that happens where
My accent was very Minnesotan.
yeah. And then nobody knows what to do with that. And then they switch to English
Yeah.
if they have English skills. So,
Right.
so there was a pretty big discussion about the title.
Yeah.
Which was
Up until
fun.
the very end.
It wasn't really that close.
Oh, yeah.
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 So, what was so Dreaming in Spanish was always the
No.
part of the working title?
No.
What, wait,
Um,
wait. We have the early title here.
Yeah. Keep dancing.
Keep Dancing, My Love Story from Party Girl to Parenthood.
Yeah.
Also, it says working
Working
title
title.
in parentheses, so.
Yeah.
So
I
it
think
wasn't a
the
lot of
first one
incarnations.
was like surrender, love and dance parties or something. There has been a number. Dreaming in Spanish was definitely the right move.
I liked it.
Yeah.
I liked it. So that's always like so if you talk to people, you know, maybe kids who go on a semester abroad or, you know, wherever, if you're going to be learning, you know, taking college courses in another language and immersing yourself, there comes that tipping point where you switch to dreaming in the other language.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So it's like it's like
a goal.
yeah, it's a tipping
Yeah.
point for
marker.
the immersion.
Yeah.
Right. So
You've known.
I
you-
really like that.
Yeah.
I do not dream in Spanish, and I may never.
Who
but
knows?
Who knows? It's a goal. It's a goal.
If you
So-
listen to Spanish speaking podcasts every night before you go to bed,
And then
you might.
I might. So, yeah, and I can listen to newscasts because it's slow enough.
Yeah.
Because they speak very precisely.
Mhm.
So, but not, you know, telenovelas,
Too
too
fast.
fast for me. So anyway, maybe someday. So now that it's been, a month? No,
Yep.
a month, like yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday. my
Yeah.
birthday.
So, you had a really successful launch.
Mhm.
So tell us about that.
I mean, they were all my friends, and I have a lot of friends who were super supportive.
There were
So
150 people at your launch.
it was really fun.
That's amazing.
And also, I throw a good party.
She
so
does. So for the authors here listening, it was a dance party.
We had a program. It was an hour-long program, and we had interviews with Marisol and Ali Muldrow, and we talked about, you know, lots of
yeah.
heavy stuff, and also we had fun. So it was a good mixture. It was really fun.
So I was just very glad that you had such a good turnout for
Yeah.
that. So, are you glad you did it?
100%.
So you were still like just leading up to the publication date, still nervous, like this year, still in yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm still nervous,
Yeah.
but I have a new, so like I've been called brave a lot in my life, and like, especially after being a sexual assault survivor
Mm-hmm.
and then being in a fire accident, like a lot of people after the burn were like, oh my God, you're so brave. You're so brave. And I hated that.
Yeah, actually, I can understand hating that.
Because it's like, I didn't choose this. It happened to me. Like, I'm just making it through the day. Whereas this, like going into launching it and like, I literally felt brave. Like, I was like, I am really brave. Like so it's a different embodiment of the
Well, it's different
feeling
than something happening to you.
versus you choosing. Like, I'm choosing to do something that's scary.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I think that's also a really healthy thing to do too, is to
things that
when
scare you.
it's important to you. Because this was clearly a lot of effort. It doesn't take, you don't write something like this in in
Year.
30 days, right?
Right.
Yeah, or a
Or a
year,
year.
or 4 years.
No,
5
it
years.
takes many years.
Depends, we all write it at different pace.
Okay, that's true. Some people can do in a year.
Well, if you have AI, no, just kidding.
Write my memoir.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine? That would be really interesting. What would it come up with? I don't even know. So there's, it's hard to know where to start because there's a jumping off point for so many different conversations here. You knew you needed to get to the point where you weren't doing hard partying, that you were getting healthier. And you had obviously, goals that were, they weren't real like fixed with like a big list. You had general goals when you moved to Puerto
I
Rico.
had 5.
That's right. They were 5.
There was get an apartment,
That's very specific.
get a job.
Okay, that's also very specific.
Dream in Spanish was 1, stay celibate and quit drinking or quit partying.
There you go.
Those were my 5.
4 out of 5 is not bad.
Right. It's the good 4 out of 5.
So if you read the book, which one didn't work so well.
Right.
It all.
I was going to call it knocked up, but but people didn't. I was also going to call it 2 for 1.
That's actually really funny. I like your sense of humor.
Well, because the scene when Carlos and I met and we were fighting about the
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And then 2 for 1.
Yeah, it makes, I think it makes sense.
Yes.
So, well, I've been in other countries alone, slightly younger than you, but English speaking countries.
Okay.
Were you scared?
Rarely. No, never.
No, I don't mean like that. Were you just scared, just lonely scared, like not like actually for your safety?
Okay.
Not like that.
Well, people
just
do
like,
ask that a lot.
oh, do they?
Oh, because
listen,
people think Mexico is scary.
that's okay. I travel to Honduras all the time. I
Okay.
don't like,
But I mean, right. So that is a thing.
like, I get it. I
Right.
get it. But I mean, it's like, can you imagine if you watched our news lately and the shootings? Like I get questions from people
100%,
from Europe are like,
yeah.
I'm not sending my kid to visit this summer because there's so many shootings.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
so
horrifying.
it's all how you process. And if you don't know a lot about a country, that there's very safe places to be
Right.
in Mexico. But no, I just mean, just like scared for yourself, scared for your future. And
I was
just,
already scared for myself.
okay, which is why you were there.
Right.
This was your, I'm going to save myself
Yeah.
moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please. Can I please?
Well, relatively quickly, you get the apartment and a job.
The job really quickly. The
Yep.
apartment took a while.
Yep.
But then, I had got that. I was staying celibate.
And then Carlos showed up.
And then Carlos showed up.
I haven't met him yet.
Oh,
I should have come to your launch party. I'm sorry.
tonight.
So I want to say, so one of the biggest compliments that I feel like a memoir writer can get is that the book felt like reading fiction.
Mhm.
Not that you were unreal with anything, but the fact that it was so well paced,
Mhm.
and your structure was so good and just really engaging. And a good balance of, just if we're going to talk story structure, a really good balance of narrative and interior thought, but also with your dialogue, like you knew when to mix it up.
Thanks.
That's the way I felt. And there's been a few books like that. I think, a book, Rose Bingham's book, Give the Little Ones a Dolly. If you guys remember that story, I feel like that one was written that way too, where this is an author from Wisconsin as well. And her mom just leaves and disappears.
Wow.
And she's the oldest of how many kids. And so she wrote this memoir finding about her mom later. And her mom had lived a second life with new kids and just things.
Wow.
Yeah, anyway. So, but hard things.
Yeah.
Hard things. So you're a very good writer. The skill set, I mean, we all think we can tell a story.
The
You
first
know.
half of the book was not as good as the second half of the book. Because as I was writing,
You got better.
I got better.
Well, it was how many years apart?
right.
Well, you went back and edited.
Absolutely. But I had an editor notice that
So
too.
notice the shift.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's like anything. You do get better the more
Or
you
you're
write
writing really quickly to get it all out in the beginning and then
Yeah.
you kind of slow
Mhm.
down and
and kind of get a rhythm
Yeah.
with it.
yeah.
No, I really enjoyed it. And so I had to keep reminding myself, and this will happen when I edit too for people. I had to keep reminding myself that I had a job to do while I was
Yeah.
reading, that I was supposed to be making notes for marketing.
Right.
And I was like, oh man, I read 3 more chapters and I got to go back and and I'll actually make notes, on the side. So very, very much enjoyed that. So what questions have you gotten the most about? Like, have you gotten the most questions about, trauma, about navigating the culture? Like what, I mean, I'm just curious. So was it a Q&A at your book
We
launch?
had a Q&A at the end, but it was very short.
Okay, so you mainly did this kind of back and forth.
Yeah, and we did a couple readings. So there's a lot of people that connect with, so it depends on how people know me too, because at this point, when you just launch, at least as a new writer, it's really your family and friends that are reading it for the most part. So people who thought that they knew me but didn't know so much, and so like those people are like, oh my gosh, wow. People who knew my mom or who knew my mom now but didn't know her then, it's really fun for them to reacquaint with her. A lot of like, there's the motherhood theme, and just like, thank you for being relatable when it comes to being a new mom.
Oh my gosh,
I got a lot of that.
I didn't pull that sheet out, but I wrote a big circle around how you can love your baby so much in one moment and then be so just fed up in the other.
Yeah.
And nobody ever says that.
Right.
Like, because we're not supposed to say that.
Supposed to say that. Right. And even when I was writing it, I was nervous. And then when my kid was reading it, I was nervous.
I bet you were.
I love you, Alex. I love you.
So hard. And no one prepares
It's so
you for
hard.
that.
It's so
Okay,
hard.
so on that topic though, so you're in a country that you're not familiar with the traditions. And I also thought the part was very funny about all the why, what do you call it?
Wives' tales, or
like all the things that people told you while you were pregnant. Oh,
yeah.
don't do this, don't do that.
Yeah.
But like far beyond what we would normally get here. Yeah.
People here don't touch your baby. They don't tell you things about like on the streets. Like people would stop me and tell me all sorts of things. So that was an adventure.
Yeah.
It was after he was born that like loneliness and potentially postpartum. I probably had postpartum depression.
I'm guessing that be what I blame my slightly psychotic episode on.
But like the desperation and the loneliness and like that was so intense.
So
and I couldn't talk to anyone about it.
So I remember there was a point, and I think you might have still been in the hospital, possibly, and a sister-in-law,
Maria,
wanted to help somehow or just stay with you.
Yeah, she wanted to stay with me, and I told her to leave.
And which I just think is a very human reaction. Like, I just want to be alone.
So when you read that, were you like, no big deal? Like, I could see her wanting to.
Yes, but I also understood not understanding the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood then later, like, so when we got to the point where you're like, why is Maria not talking to me?
Yeah.
And then Carlos he explained it.
Yeah. I mean, he found out and then he was telling me and I was shocked.
Right. Because you had no idea this was
a thing. Right.
Oh my gosh, to just navigate that. Like there's all kinds of things like that.
Because then I was thinking, what else am I doing wrong?
Right.
And no one's telling me. And so then I was all self-conscious about
Of course
that.
You would be, but just tradition wise, like there's all kinds of things.
What was interesting though, is I had another beta reader who is Mexican. And she said, when I read that, because she didn't know it was coming, that, she was going to, she was like, I knew immediately. I was like, oh, I can't believe she just told her to leave. Whereas I think, some of my friends would read it and be like, oh yeah, no big deal.
No.
And then she was like, when it came back, I was like, I knew that was going to come back to her.
Because really,
like, I didn't know.
Yeah. So they probably just wanted to have somebody with you all the time, maybe.
It's
like,
just, I mean, you don't tell your family to leave. Like you just don't.
I have. I don't know, but I thought it was a really telling moment where you're like, yeah, this is not as easy. Right. This is not as easy as it's going to be. And on that same front too, we talk about colorism a little bit too, but even so there were comments about how beautiful your baby was, in part because of
you name, like you use words like güerito, which is light skinned. So to have people in the same sentence that he's so beautiful because he's so light skinned, was very off-putting for me.
Well, and it's if you guys don't know, and I brought it up a ton of times, we're in Guatemala and Honduras a lot for our charities. And so one thing that we learned too was just how that exists, how that the within the country, other countries that
colorism.
like,
yeah.
And kids who look more in native or Indian,
Yeah. Darker skin.
darker skin. There's a hierarchy.
Right.
As well. So I was just surprised. I was surprised at that. I mean, I guess I wasn't surprised to read that. I was just like, I guess not having lived in Mexico or had, children with us in Mexico.
It made me feel bad because I was like, he's not any different than any other kid,
than any other baby on this street.
Right.
Yeah.
And same with me being treated like a princess. Like it was very weird for me to like, you don't even know me just because I look the way I look. Like I'm not any different.
When people were surprised you spoke so fluently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they'd be like, whoa, you go back and forth all the time.
To Mexico.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, not all the time, but we definitely go once a year for sure. And sometimes twice a year.
So your kids have,
yeah,
all the cousins,
yeah,
everybody.
Yeah. We WhatsApp, we Zoom,
Is it nice technology wise now?
Thankfully, yeah.
Plane tickets get expensive.
Right. And for many years we didn't have that, it was $1 a minute. Yeah.
It's like panic time, right?
Right.
$1 a minute. So overall, I think one of the first things I said to you was that I thought that your book was a love story on 3 levels. I thought it was a love story to yourself, a love story to your mom.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're presented with it being a love story with your husband.
Right.
But as I read through, I mean, the scenes with your mom are just so dear and wonderful. And what a wise mom, right?
Yeah.
And so one of those parts, was about chakras, the chakras, right?
Chakra,
So she was saying to you, I hope this is still in the book.
It is.
So she was saying to you, you were trying to decide if you should go to Mexico or to India.
So this is when you listen to your body and you put your hand right here.
Yeah.
So it's not, I guess it is a chakra, right?
Is it a chakra?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So she said,
Yeah.
Ask your body for the right answer. Your body knows.
Yes.
And she's like, you said, I don't know how to do that. Like, tell
Right.
me how to do that. So she said, put your hand here, like below your, like on your diaphragm, basically. And then
Under your boobs.
and then say the thing, say the thing. And you're like, what do you mean say the thing? Say, I'm going to India, and then see, like, how do you feel? And then say, I'm going to Mexico, and see how you feel. And I just think so much of the world kind of beats our intuition out of us.
Yeah.
Like we don't always listen to our inner voices, right? And
So I had a friend who she was in the middle of the book and she sent me a text and she was like, so I did the thing your mom said and my kid was sick and we're supposed to go to Florida, but my mom is sick. And so my dad was telling us not to come, but my husband, I felt like I should go. So it was so many things and I did what your mom said and I'm at the airport. And I loved it because I was like, my mom is still out there working the magic.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I just, and two, now that your mom has Alzheimer's and she's, does she remember you still?
So when I look at her, I can tell she knows
me.
you. Right.
Okay.
Right. But she's in a wheelchair. She can't talk. She can't feed herself. She's
right.
But I feel like we sense each other.
Right. So I think that it's particularly sweet, these remembrances.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I mean, clearly the answer was Mexico because we know the ending, but also too, religion's kind of interesting for you in the sense that you grew up in a household that was both Christian and Jewish, but also, in a way, slightly
spiritual.
Yeah.
Probably more spiritual than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting mix. Probably came with some freedoms in a way to cross,
100%.
like the different traditions, like you weren't only going to be Jewish.
Right.
Right.
Which means that when I met Carlos, it could have been anyone. My parents would have been like, whoever you want to marry.
Right.
Like there was never a
like the barrier to you better marry a Catholic.
Yes.
You better marry.
Yeah. I think my Jewish grandma wanted me to marry. She did want some of the kids to marry Jewish, but she also was like, do whatever you're going to do. But it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Did you think it was too gaudy?
No.
Are you a gaudy person?
I wasn't before some other things happened.
Okay.
Which is not that's not your story. That's my story. I mean, like I can happily tell it. I think we all run through phases in our life where we are or we aren't. And things happen to us and things, beat us down that make us, mad at the world, mad at God, mad, whatever. So part of why I do what I do now, and I don't remember if I ever told you, is I lost a sister to cancer in 2003 and a second sister to the same cancer in 2009. That's when I said, I'm not going to do the work I'm doing anymore. I don't like it. Why am I doing this? I want to write. So that's the year I started my first book. And I shifted everything and quit my regular full-time job and, made my husband crazy probably, that I was doing all these things. But I got to that point. So I was angry for a very long time about all of that. Like, I know people get sick and die all the time. Why not our family, right? But I was mad, right? So my husband, in the middle of all of this, is starting a charity. Well, about 2 years after my second sister died. He came home and he's like, had been in Honduras and had been at the largest children's home in Honduras. And he says, we're going to start a charity. It's going to be small. We have lots of friends we can ask once a year. We're going to do a well. We're going to fund a teacher, maybe build a classroom, simple, small things. And then what is that? God laughs when you plan. Like, I don't know. So in the end, what happened here is there were so many things that came to be that have no other explanation other than being a spiritual person and believing in God. And we've now raised millions and millions of dollars. We now work in 13 countries right now. And just even on the small level, the things that happen, my husband stopped at on the way to the airport once in Honduras at one of those, the second largest orphanage children's home, we now say, in Honduras. And they have a beautiful clinic, world-class hospital. They bring teens in to do surgeries. They had just set up a dental clinic, but they didn't have anyone to hook up the hydraulic, like the chairs and all the water, dental chairs. And my husband, 1 hour later, is getting on his flight and sits down next to a nun who does what does she do all over the world? She sets up dental clinics.
Wow.
What?
Right. No, yeah.
I mean, that's just a real small example of one thing. So, so I think I'm more spiritual than one denomination.
Yeah.
But I think that everybody comes to that from a different path. So I think as people are reading your book, to come back to your story, I think that you can take from it what you need.
Right.
And what do we say? Like, and leave what you don't need maybe at that time.
But when you're reading something, like if it's too much, it can
turn you off.
Totally.
I didn't find it that way. I mean, it depends on, had I read that story, your story at a different point in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know. Right. I don't know what I would have said.
I don't use the word God as much as I did then. Like, I talk about the universe and energy.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a little hard going back.
I bet. Yeah, that's interesting.
And I might have written it differently. But it's so interesting with memoir in general, because it's like, what's the truth? And then what is helpful for the reader.
Right. Right.
So.
Well, and that's always a debate. What do you leave in? What do you leave out?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I think you strike a very good balance with it.
I mean, I'm not like looking for unnecessary praise or anything. I'm more just critiquing it as a piece of work. It's fine.
I think though, too, it made sense at the time though, because what you were looking for was, balance, right? You were looking for.
I mean, I couldn't leave that. I did have some beta readers say there's too many themes.
I don't think that.
And I decided, no, I actually need all of these themes, and they all have their own arcs, but I couldn't remove any of them.
I think they work together
because they were all so pertinent to what ended up happening.
Right.
So I was like, sorry, it's not a novel. I can't just, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was.
And I think that does make sense. I mean, it's our lives aren't linear, and it's multifaceted,
right?
Like, you had to bring all of it in.
And some books, it's easier if there are, you know what I mean? If you can go deeper. So I heard what she was saying. It made sense.
Right.
And I still was like, I got to do this.
Well, and I think that part of owning your work, and anybody who's a writer, you get criticisms and, critique groups, and they'll say, we change this needs to be changed. And there are times when we go, no, and we know what needs to stay in our work.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's owning your path. Right?
So there's one part that two people wanted me to remove it. And it was the story about my mom when she was telling my friend to go look in the mirror and say, I'm smart, I'm good at math. I'm smart, I'm good at math. And I just really liked it.
I like that too.
And so I kept it in I think they were trying to help me stay on what's relevant and what's not relevant. And for me, it was because I used it a lot. I used self-talk to like, like I can do this, I can do scary things, I can get on an airplane and go somewhere.
Right.
Like, so I felt like even though she wasn't telling it to me in that moment, it was a reflection of, what I had. I mean, my mom was such a huge resource.
Right.
So it felt like it was. So one of the beta readers, Marisol specifically, she said her daughter was struggling with math every day, coming home crying. And she was reading that page, she got to page 70. And so the next morning when she walks her daughter to school, she was like, okay, let me try. Are you willing to try this? I just read this in a book. Are you willing to try it? And she told her daughter, and she was like, so you just say, I'm smart, I can do it, I'm good at math, over and over again. And the daughter was like, okay, she's 10. She's like, okay. And so the daughter goes and she takes the math test, and a couple days later she comes back and she got a pretty bad grade. And Marisol was like kind of worried, but the daughter was really proud of herself. And Marisol was like, well, like, how do you feel? And she was like, Mom, I did it. I finished every single answer. Like I finished the answer. And in the corner, because she'd brought the test home, she had written, I am smart, I can do it. Like I cried telling this story because it was like, she was like, Mom, when I thought I couldn't do it, I would look in the corner and I remember that I could do it. And she was like, and so the pride of like finishing every answer was more important than whether it was right or wrong. You know, it was like, I can do it.
Right. Well, and I think too, we often have the unsupportive voices in our head.
Mostly.
Right.
Mostly,
that are like,
yes.
what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
So to have like that whole type mantra stuff, like, and I, I'll sometimes laugh, like, I've had a girlfriend who will put things on her mirror.
Yeah.
All the things. And
like affirmation.
Yeah. And then be like something new you notice when you go to the bathroom at the house. And you're like, oh, fun. That's what we're working on now. Okay. Yeah. So I think, I don't know. I think that makes sense to keep in because I think it's part of your, the love story to your mom. Like,
yeah.
Really.
That was thread. And that thread could have been removed, I suppose, but I was like, I'm not removing that. Like my mom was a huge,
No, I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about trauma shaping decisions.
Okay.
So you clearly had a lot of trauma, both from sexual assaults, and you kind of unpacked later some of the trauma from your relationship with your dad, and just I guess it was more really a feeling of being like betrayed a little bit. Yeah, I guess like we call it that.
Stuff,
and I mean, you love your dad.
Yes.
And so, but to just as an adult to realize our parents weren't perfect. Right. And to unpack that. But so you had kind of internalized that and really, as a 24-year-old, you hadn't worked through that.
Because I was still angry.
Right.
Right. I hadn't worked through it. Right.
So that was a layer as well, along with, the sexual assault trauma.
Yeah.
And so
I was pretty angry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's logical.
100%. There's nothing wrong with anger.
So as you were processing that, I mean, I think it's hard to do like things come to us in different like bits and pieces. So like you weren't going, oh, I'm going to process like trauma now. Like, like that's
I see what you're saying.
So, but it's an interesting thing how your journey allowed you the space to process it. And so I think if you were going to talk about like your partying and, any of those types of behaviors that were not healthy, if they were a reaction to trauma.
Right.
Would you agree with
100%,
that? Okay.
100%. Like I was looking for escape. I was looking to be loved. I was looking to feel powerful.
Yep.
The power was like, when you feel powerless, then to find ways to feel power,
right,
to want it so much. So all of that was resulted from, and it, it's kind of textbook in a way. So then it's just a matter of, working through it or finding relationships that are healthy.
Right.
And then choosing those.
Right.
So like, that's why Carlos was so healthy for me, because he was like, no, we decide how we want to be together. You know, it's not just how your parents were and then you just do what they did.
Right.
Like, no.
So, also very wise.
Yeah. Like,
right.
Where did he come from?
I was like, oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
But like, gosh, so smart, right? Like,
Yeah. And
Yeah, I
then he
appreciated
shared
that.
how he came up with that, like no judgment, but I didn't want to have kids at a young age, like my brothers,
Right.
like I get to decide. So
Right.
just because this might be the norm, like we could also do it differently.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So, I thought too, the parts where you were like worried about not being the fun Sarah anymore.
Yeah. I'm
I-
still the fun Sarah.
You are still the fun Sarah. I will agree. But right, like there's a worry that like without like the party atmosphere, without having a drink or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, that like you won't be like fun anymore. But like
Well,
that,
also when you come into an identity that people like and enjoy,
Yeah.
why would you give that up?
Right.
Right. Because it's hurting you. But yeah.
but it takes a long time to actually acknowledge that because you're getting other rewards
Mhm.
for that behavior,
Yeah.
which is the belonging
Right.
and
Yeah.
really probably your friend groups
But I also
was
had judgment about people who didn't drink or didn't know how to, like, I just felt like they must be not happy, like I had all of
Yeah.
these just judgments and I didn't know when you don't know what you don't know until you know.
it's very true.
Yeah.
It's very true. I've been doing a lot of talking. Do you all have questions?
Is this normal though?
It depends.
What's next on the list?
The next book?
Yeah.
I really want to jump to 2013 when I started to do my own journey around racial justice and my understanding of whiteness and how I was raising my kids, and then move through the real estate conversations that we have a lot now. So how racism continues to show up in real estate on a daily basis. So I
Right.
think I want to tell that story, but I also really want to tell more stories about my mom. So I might do 2 books. At the
I would
same
love more
time.
stories about your mom too.
I mean, the Alzheimer's journey is also a fairly spiritual journey to some
Yes.
extent,
Yep.
because you have to surrender
Mhm.
to what is not ideal. So, and I've written a lot on Facebook about my mom and people really relate to it.
Mhm. Yeah, you have, and you get a lot of reactions on
Yeah.
Facebook to those. Well, and I think it's because so many of us are dealing with it,
Yeah.
right?
And
Like
like
with-
Alzheimer's people don't, I mean, that's something you can't talk about either, especially when it's happening to you.
Right,
Or if it's happening to a family member that doesn't want anyone to know.
right. Right,
So,
if you're in the earlier
Yeah,
stages of it.
yes. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very isolating.
It is very much so. I think too, so that part resonated with me too, because I've had family members who have, had Alzheimer's and then, the decline, it's very long.
Yes.
It's a very long decline. It's not like a lot of other illnesses. Unfortunately, that it can be very cruel that way.
Yeah.
That it's so very long. So
In regards to adapting culture, so I had a trip about 20 years ago to the USA. And it was like a part of the farmer program.
oh, with USAID, like the State Department program.
It's a non-government
Yeah,
associated.
Yep.
So, and I went to Uzbekistan. And you think in the middle of nowhere, I mean, way.
yeah, you're in the middle of, yeah.
I, kind of go out, I interact but, I went to a town about the size of the Dallas Beaver Dam.
Mhm.
And it's fairly over. And those people are the exact same. They like ice cream, they drink coffee, they
Mhm.
like to make money. They're
Yep.
they're always trying to think of new things to make, and that culture difference, so much, and I think it's because the population is the same. When you have a smaller population, kind of a rural population, it's so much easier to jump into that same kind of population, even though it's on the other side of the road.
You mean like there's enough similarities? Yeah. Mhm.
Downtown Chicago.
Oh.
It would not have been fun. It would have been a completely different world.
Yeah.
And that,
I think that's fascinating because small town culture
Yeah.
translated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is pretty cool.
It is really cool.
It's good to find our common ground, right? Like the things but you're right. The more I travel, the more I realize that people want the same things. We want good things. We all want good things
Everyone's
for our
excited
kids.
about a brand new baby.
Everybody.
Everyone gets sad when somebody dies.
Right.
Everyone doesn't, you don't want your kids to suffer.
Everybody wants something better for their
Right.
kids than they had.
I think
Yeah.
having Al, like being pregnant in Mexico and having him in Mexico, like that was this huge, like an immediate connection. Like just talking motherhood in general, and not everyone is a mother, but they all like have some relationship with motherhood to some extent. So it was just it's just instant. And so then it's like whenever you're in a space where you can't, like, it's like, how do we find common grounds?
Right. Motherhood is an easy one.
That's an easy one,
Right.
but you can find, I mean, it just goes to show you that you can find them anywhere. It's just a matter of
That's right.
being open to it.
I always make a joke about where my in-laws used to live in Florida. I take the kids down to this park and they play with all the other kids at this little park. And I didn't realize it at first, but I was talking to the nannies. There are no moms. It was all nannies and me. And then they'd be like, "Oh, you're the mom, not the nanny." And I'm like, "Oh, whoa."
But you still talking, you can still
Yeah, we
talk
still
about
talk
the
about
kids,
kids,
right?
But it was one of
right,
those
you can
moments
always
where you're
talk
like,
about kids.
"Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's a cool thing."
Yeah.
Very funny. So I hope you left this part in. So this was about how you talk about the start of your relationship with Carlos. And you have I just think the description made me laugh. So I did like a smiley face with exclamation points. The start of our relationship wasn't a boat easing off of a dock and slowly gaining speed. It was a stick shift car driven by an amateur. Sorry, that just, I don't know. I still can't drive stick shift. So I like totally starting confidently, slamming on the brakes, choking the engine, trying again with more ease, then going fast and then slamming on the brakes. I don't know. I thought
Yeah.
it was good. It was a good way to describe it. Was it
Yeah.
accurate?
100%, because we like didn't want it, but we wanted it, but we, and it was hard. It was really hard.
Okay, so I have a few more notes. Let me see what we've got for time. It was interesting to me, and actually I really appreciated your irreverence to the 12-step AA process, which made me, because it's very hard. It's not a one size fits all. And I mean, and clearly,
I'm enjoying a glass
this is
of wine
not
right
a
now.
non-alcoholic glass of wine.
Mhm.
I mean, you took from it what you could take from it,
Mhm.
and then,
Yeah, which a lot of people are like, but the whole point is to serve afterwards, right? And in my
Mhm.
perspective, you serve until it's not in alignment anymore. And then if I'm serving because I'm told to serve, because that's what I'm supposed to do,
Yeah.
how is that going to serve the people I'm supposedly serving?
right.
So, and I trusted that there were other people who really were still in alignment. So it's not like I was going to leave and then AA was going to fall. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like people can come and go, and
You weren't the cornerstone of AA, and it was going.
if you feel like if you leave, you're
Like you
you're
failed.
yes,
You failed, which is not true.
it wasn't.
But I think everybody's path is different. So,
100% right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. And I'm super grateful for AA.
oh yeah.
So
yeah.
like, I don't bash it at all. It really helped me a lot.
And I know there's alternatives. There are
Now there are.
Yeah.
I don't think back then there were as much.
and so I think that if there's a lot of helpful messages people can get from your memoir, but that's also one of them, that if this is not serving you well.
I really wanted to Holly Whitaker. I really want to do a shout out to Holly Whitaker, who wrote the book Quit Like a Woman,
Yes.
because that's an
Yes.
awesome book and she's doing amazing work.
Right. And that is not an AA style
No.
system.
No.
So, all right.
Yeah.
So that was one of my notes. I wanted to
And
talk about
I
that.
was worried that AA people were going to get mad at me when they read the book. And
Well-
I don't know yet, to be told. And if
Well-
they do, they do.
Maybe they just won't say it.
Maybe they won't say it.
Or they won't recommend their book to their AA.
Whatever.
group.
Yeah, but probably not recommended. Who knows
Um,
though? It's just,
And so there's this kind of slightly recurring theme. It happens in a few different spots where you want to be a change agent, you want to be a rebel,
Mhm.
but you were looking for the way to be
to fit in. How do
To
you
fit
fit
in.
in when you want to rebel against it all?
right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's also a really positive message, theme, whatever, that the way you achieve your goals can look different depending upon where you are and what age you're at.
Yeah.
Right?
And
Yes.
hopefully that we can learn to understand who we are to then be how we want to be in the world, right? Instead
Right.
of like, who should I be? But like, wait, who am I first?
Right.
So that process of self-examination and then, and being nice to yourself, like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
I'm so loud, you know, like there's plenty of things I could say about myself that like, I could either take the negative stance or the positive stance.
Mhm.
So
Right.
my mom would say, take the positive.
Yes. And what was it that she always said? Wait. The world is not conspiring against you. The world is conspiring for you.
Yeah.
Did you guys remember that part? Did that, like, I don't know. Just because it's
Which, to be fair, it is nuanced in that sometimes shitty stuff happens.
Right.
So like, that's where it's hard to, you know, like, I don't like the full on spiritual bypassing of
right.
everything's meant to happen for a reason. And that was a huge battle for me.
Yeah. And I think too, I still get annoyed with that phrase.
It really sets a lot of people off. And there's a lot of people that hold really strongly onto it. And so like, where can we see how that's also nuanced? And if it works for you, great, but please don't push it on me.
Well, and there's a lot of people who are like the overly positive,
Yeah.
like, you know, rosy.
The
whatever.
hierarchy of good or like feeling good.
Yes.
Like it's not okay to feel bad. So how do we quickly get you to good?
Right.
And like, that's not,
Instead of letting you
actually
own.
Can I feel bad for a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's okay.
It's okay.
This thing happened. You're allowed to feel bad for a while.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's very interesting. And we're very much,
I mean,
we're not comfortable with the uncomfortable.
No. Yeah. I mean, 100 times in lots of different spaces where I'm uncomfortable if you are sad or if you are upset or if you are right. And so even doing racial justice work, it's like, if I made someone upset, instead of trying to make it right away, why don't I just allow for it to be, you know, that's the defensive reaction of, no, wait, I didn't mean it like that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you meant. Like, let's just focus on the fact that I made a mistake and said something and you're upset about it.
Yep.
And so it's okay to be upset about it.
Right. To acknowledge that I'm really sorry.
And for me to know that I'm still a good human being, I'm not bad, and you can be upset, and disappointed.
Well, and it works way better when you are in a group of people that know you like well, you know, and so that they know where you're coming from if you misspeak or whatever, and they're not going to like not talk to you ever again. Right.
And if someone chooses not to talk to me ever again, then
that's on them. Right.
And it might be on me too, but it also is like, I'm not going to try and make them understand, that's called the consequences of being a human.
Right. Very much so. Very much so.
We disappoint and hurt people, and it's okay. We can repair and move on.
And we need to be able to forgive ourselves for
making mistakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have some questions.
Okay.
So are your kids bilingual, and did you translate this to the Spanish?
We were just talking about that.
Yeah.
My kids are bilingual. We got them into a Spanish immersion school, K through 5. So because we were like, they could maybe learn to speak by
Is that Nuestro Mundo?
Nuestro Mundo, yeah. But we knew we wouldn't be able to teach them to read and write because we were so busy working. So we were really passionate about hoping that they got into Nuestro Mundo. So we actually moved so they could get into that school.
I do know a lot of bilingual kids who only speak the language the second language that they learned.
But they
never, because they didn't go to a school to actually learn grammar.
Right.
Like Spanish grammar.
Yeah.
And
so yes, they're both bilingual.
And they carried that into it.
Yeah. Because a lot of their cousins, the majority of their cousins do not speak any English. There's 2 aunts that speak English out of 7. So yeah, that was important. And then what was the other question?
Oh, is your book translated to the Spanish?
No, and it really needs to be.
Did you guys hear what the question was? Okay, good.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay.
It's not translated. I was asking how to do that. Like, I guess I would have to pitch it to a publisher in Mexico to ask them to buy the rights to translate it.
If you wanted it to be sold there, I mean, you can get it translated here. It would be under your I
would have to pay for it.
You would have to pay for the translation.
Yeah.
Which is not cheap.
Like what?
I don't know. You can get a bid.
Okay.
You can get a bid.
But
okay. But I mean, it would be
$5,000.
It could be more than that.
Yeah.
You can't just rewrite it yourself.
I could never.
Oh.
I mean, I can write, but not like that literary sense of like, no.
Well, picking,
And I haven't, I
picking
mean,
the right
my Spanish
words.
gets worse and worse the longer we're here. I'm
Right.
actually taking a conversational Spanish class because my kids make fun of me all the time. They sound like I'm so white.
Well.
I get by fine, but if we moved there, you know, I
You'd pick
would
it up
get by
again.
fine.
I always say that if I could spend like a summer, like in Honduras or Guatemala, wherever, you know, where I consciously only.
Yeah, when you're
spoke,
immersed in it.
Yeah.
100%.
and then didn't
pick it up
didn't
real
hang out with a bunch of Americans where we at
Yeah.
night where we switched to English all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can pick
It's
it
in
up.
there somewhere,
It
but you have a
is.
degree. You have a degree in Spanish,
Right.
so you had a lot more classes than I did.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is a use it or lose it.
I have another question.
Keep going.
Did you journal when you were younger, like in high school or college?
Yeah.
Journal during that?
The majority, like, I have a lot from college and high school, you know, or maybe that's just the content was so boring, kind of like who was cute in class that day kind of stuff. But so I had some in high school and then a lot of it was in college. Yeah.
So what is it like? I don't journal. Do you have like a cover with all your journals and you go back and pull it out and you look at them?
I have a plastic bin. And when I got deep into it, 2020, when I was like, all right, you know, I brought the bin up and then I organized them and put dates and because they were in different things and like different notebooks. I didn't like buy the same notebook every year. Right. So, and that box has sat in my office until last week. And I packed it all up,
Back
put
in
it in the
storage.
basement. Yeah. And so, yes, there were definitely times when I would just go through and I mean, some things is like verbatim from the journal because it was like, why not use that? Because that's exactly what it is.
Was honest, written right at the time it happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have more questions?
Do you have more
Heather has good
Yeah, one more
questions.
So this is through Little Creek, but do you ever like big publisher, like you put it out there or how does that work?
I did. So back in November was when I did a very focused time of research to figure out what was the best option for me. Was it in November? I pretty much knew I was going to end up self-publishing somehow because I didn't think a traditional publisher would pick me up anyway because I'm a brand new author. And also the concept of waiting 6 months for every single, like you have to pitch for and then wait and then pitch. And I was like, I don't want to wait. Like I have other books I want to write and I really want to like move on.
And you wanted this one out.
I really wanted this one out. So I ended up, then I researched like different kinds of presses and someone connected me to Kristen at Little Creek. I believe it was that one of the editors I worked with, Susanna Danielle, who runs the Madison Writers Studio.
That would make sense.
Michelle. Yeah.
Yep.
And so I think I actually was recommended to her by someone else at Mystery to Me, Joanne Berg at Mystery to Me.
Yeah.
She was very, very helpful. She was actually, I will follow back up, but she gave me 5 titles because she was a beta reader and one of them was Dreaming in Spanish, which had been an on the list. And so when she also had it, I was like, okay.
Like she's been a bookseller for many years.
Yeah. So like that's one of hers. It wasn't her top, but it was on there. So it was once I started talking to Kristen, it was pretty clear that was the best for me, the best option. And then she did this cover, which I love the cover. And then Jessica Gutierrez is an artist and she did those flowers in the corners. And she has beautiful art. Yeah. And so we started with the flowers and then she did the rest. It was a really fun process.
I like the color scheme is very pretty.
Yeah, it was a really fun process. Not everyone says that, I don't think, about the publishing process. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of moving parts and things can go wrong.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're flexible. I feel like you're flexible.
I can roll with the flow. Yeah.
You know, I mean,
but I also have really high standards for the way things are handled.
Right. Right. So I think, I mean, you knew what you wanted and that helps because you're a good communicator to be able to say,
true.
This is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
This is what I'm needing. So there's that squishy area that can cause issues sometimes when there's not good communications.
Yeah. Yeah.
More questions? Any questions? Is there anything else you would like to add, Miss Sarah?
Thank you for reading my book. That's all I got.
That's all you got?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out. We
It
really
was
appreciate it.
yeah.
Fun conversation.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Sarah.
Thank you.